Good evening and welcome once again to Book Club Conversations Series 8. Through this series, we present conversations that feature professionals and entrepreneurs. As we reflect on practical applications, all business owners should be mindful to engage as they think big and upscale operations. The focus of this evening's discussion is corporate governance and business success, as we touch on legal mandates for sole proprietors, partnerships, and corporate entities. I am your host, Alina Lewis, author and success coach. And joining the conversation in this episode is Rawle Rollocks, impact strategist, Nalini Suratingh, Candace Andrews, and Kathryn Joseph. Now remember, for reminders and notifications every time we go live, be sure to follow this page. So that means if you're viewing on YouTube, make sure you've clicked subscribe. If you're following us on Facebook, make sure you like. And if you're viewing on LinkedIn, make sure you follow so that you can get those notifications and updates, and especially have access to links to resources when we post them. Now, Book Club Conversation Series 8 is brought to you through the support of Launchpad Consultancy. So as we get ready to welcome our guests, let's take a word from Launchpad. And we are in this evening with a dynamic group of ladies, and hopefully a gentleman will join us later. But I want to open the floor to give these ladies the opportunity to introduce themselves before we jump into this evening's conversation. So I'm going to start at the top with Kathryn. Kathryn, please take a moment to share who you are, what you do, and what you have going on at your institution that others may be interested in learning about.
Hi, so good evening, everyone. My name is Kathryn Joseph. I am the founder of an amazing company called Trini Bakes Limited. It is a company, number one frozen dough company in Trinidad and Tobago, and I would say dare say the Caribbean. I am a real person who's done a lot of things. I'm a registered nurse, I'm a mommy. I am a person who is in behavior change and behavior change services. I've been consulting across the region, helping institutions look at their strategic planning. But really, more than anything else, I focus on helping persons succeed, particularly around the area of their soft skills and things that help you negotiate that space. One of the things that I think I bring to this whole conversation as a business person is that I was very academic. So I have master number one and master number two. And then I got into operations and realized I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know it, and had to figure that out along the way. And so I am able to tell persons about the real mistakes that I've made. And now I'm succeeding around, and I'm able to bring that experience to the table.
Awesome. Thank you, Nalini. We have Nalini with us. Can you take a moment, introduce, I leave the floor to you, Nalini.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Nalini Suratingh. I am the CFO at a municipal corporation. I also am the CEO of a company that my husband and I jointly own. That is a consultancy and business services company. I'm a chartered accountant by profession and have been fortunate to have functioned in various roles and would have contributed and um, been exposed to many different areas of management and accounting and governance. So I'm very happy to be a part of this evening's proceedings and, look forward to being able to share and receive as well,
Thank you, Nalini. Candace, allow me to have you reintroduce yourself. You've been here before, but we're not leaving you out at all, eh?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that opportunity, and good evening to everyone and everyone who's listening to the live and to the replay. My name is Candace Andrews. I am a recent theatre arts teacher, but before that big vocation, I started my business last year when I realized a lot of creative entrepreneurs were doing more complaining than trying to come up and create new avenues for themselves. So I said, let me try and come to the rescue by creating platforms for them virtually to expose themselves, to expose their brand, and to get visibility. Since then, I've been able to help a lot of persons push past the fear of wondering if anyone will take them seriously and really offer them their skills. And I'm very happy to be part of the conversation. Of course, I'm always honored to be probably the youngest person on the panel because I get to stretch myself because I hear certain concepts and I'm always trying to research and connect all the dots. But very happy to share that there are a lot of things that we are not keeping up with. And I'm hoping that in this conversation, we could unpack some of those large concepts and try to see how we could relate it to what's happening with us now on the floor. So thank you again. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Love it. And of course, last but not least, the king among the queens here on the panel tonight, Rawle. Share with the people
Hey,
about who you are and what you represent.
hello, good evening, ladies, and certainly a pleasure to be here with you. Um, I'm hearing so many those great introductions. I know we have a power pack panel this evening, and welcome to all those listening, whether you're listening on the YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, however you're listening. It's nice to have you. I wear many hats. Certainly, I see myself as a lifelong learner and an advocate for entrepreneurship. I am passionate about, I believe each person has that entrepreneurial spirit in them, but it needs to be awakened. And we live in a time and age where it doesn't matter what position you have, where you're working, everyone needs to look at entrepreneurship and getting into business as an opportunity for their own financial independence. But apart from that, there's something about entrepreneurship that allows you to see yourself and find yourself and give your best back to the world. So that's me in a nutshell. This evening, I represent Assuage Business Development Limited. And at Assuage, we are passionate about helping organizations go beyond Trinidad and Tobago and explore trading in the other islands within the region and the world. So that's our passion, really, to take whatever you have, whatever creative juices you have, whatever you're doing, and take it to another level. So a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
I love that. And I really want to jump into a bit of an open floor conversation as we begin to break things down. Candice mentioned the idea of large concepts and big terms. And we use two of those tonight. There's this idea of corporate governance and there's this idea of legal mandate. And whichever one you feel comfortable chatting about, I would love if you guys could share about what it means and what people should understand corporate governance to be all about and legal mandates to be all about. And I'm leaving the floor open for contributions.
But I would just want to start around the concept of corporate governance. And for me, when I think about now, there's a formal definition of corporate governance, which speaks about the way, what are the systems that we have in place to legally manage the business and succession in the business. So it talks about how you set up your board and your directorship, as well as the way that we govern our in our business. And so that's the more formal definition. But really, corporate governance is about putting proper systems in place to ensure that your business doesn't just stay at one level. Particularly if you have the vision of a business that have good succession planning, you want to have systems upfront that is able to have good accountability and transparency. So when you talk about corporate is always about business, but the governance part is how do we govern ourselves? Do we, when funds are made, when we get income, do we just take out something and don't put anything back? What are the systems of accountability? What are the systems of meeting and making decisions? Who makes the decision? Those things are really, really important. And from my own experience, having had a business that we started right in the living room table, right here, from up front, we started to think about how do we want to manage this business, because we wanted this to be a business that could be succeeding and going beyond ourselves. And in order for you to have that type of business, you need to have proper systems.
I'm thinking, Kathleen, I want to stay with you a little bit if that's okay, please. I'm thinking about the entrepreneur that is not sure if they have systems, the entrepreneur who is listening to you and trying to get a visualization and pin what you just said with what is the reality of what's going on in their business. And I want to ask you, um, how do people begin to create systems if you don't know? We're talking about the person who don't know better, and
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that it's a novice or you're within your first year of business. It
sure.
just means you've been operating without
Mhm.
systems, without accountability, without these things. So let's say you've not been operating in it. How do you begin to operate in that level of having systems as you've mentioned it?
That's a really, really good question. The first thing is that I think it's really important to know what you want to do in business. For us, and I'll tell you my story, when we started Trinity Beaks Limited, it was an idea that my husband said he thought it was a good idea. We were doing frozen dough, we're preparing it. We had a lot of friends who just loved it and loved eating fresh bread, but didn't want to touch flour. And so we started doing it. When we decided to take this as a business, in fact, Rawle came across to my house and said, "This is phenomenal. You should do this as a business." We had to figure out what we wanted out of this business. And I knew from upfront, but because we started from a place of limited information about business, I had never actually run a business. I'm a consultant minded person, so I'm a technical person. So I had never really run a business. So I didn't really know nothing about the systems. I really wasn't sure about what to do. But we sat down and we had some conversations around how we are going to make decisions. And one of the things that happened initially was that ad hocly. I was the big brave one, so I used to just take all the decisions. And then we started to think through with role guidance, how we actually do it properly on paper. So some of the things I would tell people that I learned is one, if you do not have a clear idea of how decisions are made, one of the things to determine is that we make decisions together by consensus, or this person has the final say in the decision. That's something that you could decide amongst yourself. For us, it was about consensus, and that actually works best, I think, because everybody feels that they have a voice in it. The second thing was, what decisions need to be made. Decisions about how we manage money, decisions about who works, decisions about how we're going to get the product from point A to point B. All those things are decisions that are critical to the function of your business. So we had to work out what was important for us. Then, if you want to access funds anyway, you need to have minutes of a meeting. You have to open a bank account. Somebody has to say to open their bank account based on the information we got. So we started thinking through what are the things that are important to us, because we wanted a business that has a legacy. We knew we were starting a legacy. And because of that, we wanted things that we could put in place that allowed our children to have a sense of our history. So our corporate governance centered around understanding who the business was, where it was going. So some of the things I would suggest in terms of your own system is one, what are we considering accountable things? Money becomes a really major issue when you start, particularly when you start making. When everybody poor in the process and you're now putting in all the equity and all the funds, it's not as issue. But when you start making profits, we need to know what we're going to do with the profit. Are we going to put all back into the business, or are we going to set aside a certain amount? And are we paying ourselves? When are we paying ourselves? All those questions are things that are really important to kind of think through and document if possible, or sit down and agree on this is how we're going to do it, and then follow through.
Yeah, I appreciate you being so very nuts and bolts about the examples that you gave, because I really feel that those who are in that category, they're really going to benefit from those examples that you just shared. But I want to take a step back, because, of course, we started off wanting to establish understanding of corporate governance and legal mandates. Is anyone else on the panel care to share maybe about legal mandates, seeing that Kathleen spoke about the corporate governance. When we think about legal mandates, what should be coming to mind?
You know what is interesting is while I was hearing Kathleen speak, I was laughing in my mind because when I started business, nothing about the legal aspect was on my mind because I felt like coming into business was like a nice kumbaya moment. You know, I'm a peaceful person, no war or no kind of bad blood is gonna happen. And I don't know about you, but I know that in most Caribbean homes, there's this one chair. They say, "Oh no, don't pull that out because the seating is bad. We need to fix it." And I think when you don't have all the pieces together, it's like having that well laid out table with that one chair that says, "No, don't sit there. The seating is bad." And as a teacher, you are forced to come up with definitions. So I was like, let me see if I could figure out a definition for this legal aspect and legal structure. And this is what I came up with, and I had to write it down because I couldn't remember. Legal structures are for maintaining the peace, setting clear boundaries, holding each other accountable, and of course, protection for all. And I remember when I hired a virtual assistant because I did not know anything about administration. I just knew I had the ideas, I had the enthusiasm, I had the innovation, but the systems didn't really exist. And when persons started to ask me the hard questions, I was like, you don't worry, God will take care of that. Or when we reach that bridge, you know, everything will be okay. And then when my virtual assistant said, sure, Candace, I'm on board, right after she followed up with a legal document. These are the terms and conditions. This is what I need you to sign into. And I was like, sis, I thought we good. Why we need all of this paperwork? But then I realized that the paperwork plays structure for me. It helped me with deadlines. It helped protect her. It helped me remain accountable in terms of I need to pay her this X amount of money by this time. And I think most companies suffer because their legal arm is very weak, is very limb, is very feeble. They don't see the need of having a lawyer. And a lawyer is not just to say, okay, bacchanal going to happen, so let me have somebody on the front line to write a letter. No, it's just to say, these are the company's mandates. These are their cultural and value structures, and they just want to make sure that those structures are maintained. So when we think about business success, and I know you're going to go into that later on in the conversation, I think a lot of our failures come from the failure of not looking at the legal aspects, because sometimes we go to the bank, we ask for loans, we do all these transactions, and we realize, wait, the bank is going to put a question mark on our business because we don't have certain paperwork and legal systems in place. So I had to learn that the hard way. And I remember when I had to start the bank account for the business, I was like, these people think I'm they treated me like I deported or something. Like, why are they asking me all of these questions? I'm going in. But they had to, because they had to make me realize that, Candace, you're not in business for 2 months. You are in business for the long haul. And along the way, you are going to meet certain things that you want to be able to protect yourself from. So, and of course, insurance is a whole different question altogether. But just for the context of now, I think it's really, really important to have that legal system in. And I've realized with business, people are afraid of 3 words: finance, accounting, and legal systems, because it's like, why we have to deal with the figures, why we have to deal with the letters, why we have to deal with the paperwork, why we just can't make the money and make things happen. But yeah, that's what I want to inject into the conversation. And as we go along, I hope people will remove the fear of getting that legal in check and doing the surgery that's necessary.
Thank you for that, Candace. Reopening the floor. Maybe one more contribution on this part.
Yeah, I'd want to.
When I
Oh, there's Nalini.
No, you can go ahead. I defer.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to add, sometimes we could see corporate governance and these issues are so divorced from what we have to do. But I think corporate governance and the legal mandates begin with the customer. It begins with your clients. It begins with the stakeholders. That's where it really begins. And it begins with what is called your duty care. You have a duty of care to these individuals. All right. So I see corporate governance as a progressive realization of your duty of care. Because when you start out your business, you're not really thinking about all the implications of the things that you do and the things that you don't do. But as you learn, you begin to expand the duty of care and realize, wow. But the thing about it is, if we think about it, we expect it, even though we may not give it as entrepreneurs. So for example, if you go onto a plane, right, you would expect, if you're going on a flight, that there are quite a number of things that are in place, that the pilot is trained, that he's legally certified, that he does the training over and over again, that the plane itself is certified. You understand what I'm saying? That all the things that are need to be in place are in place, because you don't want that plane to fall out of the sky. So you have a high expectation of that plane flight, or you have a high expectation of that doctor that you go to, the kind of questions you'd want to see, the certificates. All these things are part of your duty to care. So the more you think about it, you realize, wow, and each industry is different. It varies from industry to industry. So you begin asking yourself things about, is this fair? What I'm doing, is this equitable? All right. Does this give the customer the best opportunity to see what I'm doing and be able to make a right choice? Am I pulling wool over my client's eyes? You understand? Do I have a proper record of what's happening in my business? All these things begin and end with the customer and your duty to care.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Nalini, you were going to give a contribution.
Well, just in a nutshell, for me, governance is essentially, and I think everybody would have touched on this, is just how you run things. And the minute you make that decision, or you're exploring getting into business or launching something, launching an enterprise, you need to have an idea of how it's going to happen, and the nuts and bolts of it. And I like the fact that Kathleen would have talked about systems, because it really is to understand that, it can be ad hoc, but it can also be quite chaotic if it's ad hoc. So there must be some amount of structure to it. And I also liked, what Rawle was saying about the fact that, there is that duty of care, because whatever venture you set out into, what you're going to be serving or providing products to a market, and you have to understand who it is you're dealing with, and who's your target. How do you attract them? And it comes to, how do you care for them? Because for me, I try to, my philosophy is one where, it's more esoteric, in that, if you start with values and caring, then there's a certain amount of engagement based on trust and integrity and so on, that will flow from that. Also wanted to just to share, when we talk about my thoughts on legal mandates, that, one must not divorce, and it's often an afterthought, how do we legally do this thing? So I'm going to start a business. I'm going to make ice cream and sell. So I'm going to start selling ice cream, set up a little table outside in my yard, and it grows. And then what? So, you talk about the need for financing and what is the best legal structure. And there is a system within the system of the country, the government, that requires some amount of legal compliance and legal registration. And there is a need to understand how that system works, how it impacts upon your business, the choice or the medium of business that you decide to pursue. So just to talk about the legal side of things, Candace was talking about, the fact that we tend to stray away from certain areas. And yes, you're here, when you start thinking, oh God, legal form and legal affairs and register the businesses, oh my God, right? But these are all parts of the system of getting a business or an entity going. Very important, and also for your own protection, and part of your duty of care to protect the constituency or the market that you wish to serve.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And while I'm with you, allow me to stay with you, Nalini, and ask, do you have any recommendations for how persons can learn more about legal mandates or legal requirements? Where are there books to be read, websites to be visited, other?
Sorry. Yes. And first of all, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, their website has a resource section that would help you in terms of and give guidance in terms of some of the forms and the more technical forms that need to be filled out. Um, not There have been articles published in the various business newspapers. So if you Google and or if you have access to the web version of the Guardian or the Express and so on, you'll be able to go through the archives and find information. I also found that for me, even though even foreign websites, even though the legal structures are different and the legal requirements are different, there is a lot of information and explanations that are really quite fundamental and common to all jurisdictions. So entrepreneur.com Inc. Um, very, very user friendly, simple language, and very, very helpful in terms of just the nuts and bolts and basics of how to get things going.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I want to ask a very broad question, and I really want to leave it open to have us contribute. And there usually is an assumption that, based on the type of business, whether sole trader, partnership, limited liability, otherwise, even NGOs, that corporate governance may or may not apply. Legal mandates may or may not apply. So I want to leave the floor open because I know each of us bring a different level of experience and understanding. So I know we'll be able to speak to the different categories and experiences. And I want to ask the question: does corporate governance and the idea of legal mandates apply to all business types and all business sizes? So again, I want to leave the floor open for contributions so that we could have a nice dialogue about it. So who's jumping in here to
I'm
share?
gonna jump in
Sure.
because I think I've run the gamut. So my husband is a woodworking connoisseur, and he would have had a sole trader, and so he was a registered sole trader, and then we set up Trinibix, which was initially a partnership between myself and him, and then we got a business partner. We set up a limited liability company so that we have a limited liability, sole trader, partnership, all those experiences that came together, and a lot of understanding around that. So we recognize that um, whether or not you're a limited liability or sole trader, when he had to get into Netco, IBIS had a program where he was to get a business mentor. He needed to still have his taxes done. He still needed to have a proper accounting of his books. And all those things were still requirements, legal requirements, in order for him to access some of the funding that he needed to access and to get into the program. So whether or not you're a sole trader, a limited liability, or a partnership, there are some fundamental things that one must have. One must do an annual return. For a limited liability, you need to do an annual return. You need to do like a beneficial owner. Who are the beneficial owners of this company? For a sole trader, I don't recall them having to do annual returns, but certainly you need to have a proper documentation when you want to access um, some of the financial institutions. From a term of accountability, when I met him, he was already doing woodworking, and even the way that you did your contracts with persons, there was a quotation system. You need to have a proper quotation that told persons not only what was the labor cost, but the material cost, and that you negotiated so that there was a document that set out a schedule of work as well as a system for accountability. So even though you may have been a sole trader, where from the perspective of, if there's something went wrong legally, you are the persons who are going to be directly impacted in terms of, if somebody decides to sue. as opposed to a limited liability where the company is now seen as an entity of its own. There are things that one always have to do, and the laws have changed, and the veil was removed so that even if you are a limited liability, directors can be held directly responsible if they did not do their due diligence. And just to make it even a little more specific to our company, where we do a frozen dough company, we need to make sure that all our products before they hit the groceries had gone to the ministry and had were tested and were able to say that this was appropriate for shelf life for groceries. So we had to get our free for sale certificate. We needed to make sure that our staff have their food badge annually. So there are things that you need to ensure that you do to make sure that you are delivering a service of a particular quality.
Yes,
Indeed.
thank you.
I agree with Kathleen because even as a event and wedding host, I realize a lot of people think, well, I'm just having a micro wedding and it's the pandemic. I don't have to worry about all the other moving parts. And I told them micro or macro is still the same amount of effort, manpower, and even finances to some extent. So there's this great quote that says, begin with the end in mind. When you start off in business, you are not supposed to play small, or think that you are going to remain small. You always leave room for growth, and something is about to happen for you. So I think you could never lose with having information. Information brings power, information brings escape from certain situations. So if that sole trader versus the corporates and all of these different organizations, once they have that mindset and access to knowledge, the right knowledge, I think they could never go wrong. Somebody who is selling lemonade on a Sunday could never go wrong with understanding how to keep books, understanding what are some of the things I should put in place. Because guess what? By doing this and by implementing these practices and systems, they are making room for themselves and their business to expand. And you can't make room if you are not putting things in place for room to actually exist. So and talking about resources, since we're talking about business success, a lot of people don't realize that business is not just about paperwork, it's about humans. And this is one of the best books I've read that could help anybody. I hope you could see the lighting properly. Behavior Never Lies by Richard Flint. And I think corporations and thinking about governance, you are governing people, and people are the ones that are going to run the systems. And if you don't understand their behavior patterns, if you don't understand how can I better their behavior to make better decisions, things are going to fall apart. So I'll recommend this book. And the second book I want to recommend, he's from, I call him, he's a pastor, but he's a motivational speaker as well. His name is Dr. Darius Daniels, and he wrote this book, Relational Intelligence. If my friends are seeing this and you're thinking, Candace, I want to borrow it, I have not finished taking in everything I want to as yet, so I'll let you all know when you could borrow it. But it's very important to understand relationships, because sometimes we think, well, that person is in finance and I'm in marketing. We don't really need to be friends. Or that person is a janitor. No, the person with the keys and the person who cleans up is just as important as the manager, or just as important as the owner. So I think in a nutshell, I think we really need to understand our ability to effectively respond to situations that happen. And of course, inside all of this conversation, we're talking about risk management as well. How are we able to embrace failure and not run from it? How are we able to bounce back from failure? So in all of this, I think is really important for us to understand that we need to understand relationships. We need to understand how to make people feel empowered and not just make them think, well, I'm just here for the salary and they don't really think much of me. So it goes back down to that relational level, and it goes back to how do we not just manage persons, but teach them how to manage themselves. So yeah.
Much.
If I may share, I was just thinking, Candice, that what you just contributed is the essence of what governance really is, it's not only about minutes and policies. You talk about the relationships and understanding and so on. I mean, understanding the relationships between, you talk about finance and marketing. That is what it is. That I couldn't have said it better. I just really wanted to commend you on that. I think you've really gotten to the heart and the meat of it in terms of what governance is. Yes, there is a need for structure and formalities and written policies, but these um, higher level aspects of governance really emanate from a level of understanding of the entity. And yeah, I just, sorry, I just had to say that that was perfect.
Yes, I agree. I agree as well. It's when you, I think once you begin with the whole idea of a duty of care to another person, you begin to realize all the implications. Now, of course, it will vary from sole trader, because once we start talking about a duty of care, it means we have a liability, right? Something may go wrong, something can go wrong. What happens? All right. And then who's liable? All right. That liability expands as you go up to the limited liability company, in the sense that the company is partly liable, but then you have staff, you have employee. So liability is spread. All right. So that this whole idea of understanding a duty of care, no one can escape, whether you're a sole trader, whether you're a multinational corporation. In fact, it extends, because what begins to happen when you get to that level, you begin to understand, but wait, no, you have a responsibility to the environment too. What do you do with your garbage? What do you do with your refuge? You understand? Do you just throw it out? And then you realize it isn't enough just to throw away my garbage. I need to put it in sections. I need to have plastics. I need to have, you understand? And that is why I like to use the word a progressive realization of your duty of care, because you're not going to understand all these things when you begin. But if you understand that you have a duty to care, you'll continue to ask the questions. Am I doing all that I can to ensure that my duty of care is being taken care of? I'm handling this responsibly. It means sometimes that you may have to do more planning. You have to put more work in. You have to put more structure just to make sure that that duty of care is held up. You want to plan, Candace made a very good point about risk management. You have to sit down and think about what can happen. All right. If you're making juice, if you're into agro processing, what can happen with this product and the client? So you have to literally think through all these possibilities and put something in place. And in that way, everyone is affected. You cannot escape it. And as I said at the beginning, the truth is we expect it of others. Once we walk into an establishment, we expect that they would have put the corporate governance structures in place to serve us. You understand? We have a high level of expectation when it comes to service that comes to us. We must match that level of expectation with what we're willing to serve to others. Right?
I just want to maybe add, Alina and team, that many times you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know what you don't know. And I'm talking about somebody who's walked that tour, because sometimes, and this is why the statement from Rawle that you need to be a lifelong learner is very critical, because when I mean, we've walked on plenty nails. When we got into the frozen dough business, we didn't understand enough about the freezing process. Because I have a little physics in the background of my head, I was able to understand the dynamics of it. But we didn't understand what temperature it took for you to get bread dough frozen properly, so that the customer must have what I wanted the customer to have. I wanted the customer to have that authentic experience of their bread raising, that sense of pride that they are the baker. And we didn't understand a lot of things. And one of the things that I think people need to do is recognize that you need to educate yourself. There are courses all over the place. I think there's something called Allison Online. There are things that I see Launchpad doing. There are things Assuage will be doing. There are things Vision will be doing. But there are persons who you don't have to know everything. And from an overachiever that I definitely know I am, I try to understand every single aspect of my business. But understanding every single aspect of your business doesn't mean you have to implement it or you have to take responsibility for doing it. You need to get persons with competencies in spaces that allows you to be able to do the best that you can do in terms of what is your duty of care. Because sometimes we want to be management and operations at the same time, and it don't work. And so in terms of just really understanding that you have things must be governed, things must be organized, systems must allow things to happen consistently. Because one of the things that you don't want to happen is that you start today and tomorrow your quality is impacted. And every time that happens, you lose trust with your clients and you lose business. So governance allows you to offer consistently consistency. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathleen. I know even as we wind down, I want to just really open the floor for closing thoughts. We've chatted a lot. We've said a lot about corporate governance, legal mandate, system structures, risk accountability. What are your closing thoughts for people who are live and those who would look at the replay? Open floor.
I guess I'll jump in. I will I will end where I began. All right. When you get into business, no matter how small, you could be selling nuts on the highway. You have a duty of care, and with that comes a structure. So you have to be concerned about if you're baking that nuts, what temperature you're baking it at. Do you have it in the right package? Is anything going into the package? You have a responsibility to look at all the systems in place to make sure that that nut arrives at that person in the best quality. All that this is governance. All right. So it's not something that we can escape. We live every day and we expect it. When we go out and we purchase food, we are thinking that that person has the food badge, they have trained cooks, the place is clean, they have the proper accounts. We expect that. So if we're going to expect that, then we have to be put ourselves in a position to give the best. But understand, don't be fearful about it. Understand that it's a progressive realization of your duty of care. Once you keep asking the questions, you're going to get the answers. All right. We've shared some resources tonight, and there are lots more resources. If you just decide to go down to legal affairs, talk to someone at BIR, get a copy of the Companies Act. You may not understand everything, but it's a progressive realization. Start with one word or one line that you understand and ask a question. Call up Nalini. Nalini knows everything about these things. You understand? Start somewhere, all right, and progressively realize your duty of care and expand what you're doing, expand your systems. You won't have all the systems in place when you start, but continue to expand and develop, and you'll be surprised. All right. Now, an interesting aspect of this I always like to underscore is when it comes to expectations, some of us try to escape this whole what we call a burden of corporate governance because we think we're going to stay under the radar, not pay our taxes, not pay our, but then you have to go to the hospital or you want service. You expect a policeman to come and help you if you're in trouble. All these things go right back to your duty of care to maintain your books properly, do your accounts, and to pay your taxes. You understand? So we have expectations, but are we willing to meet it? So I want to encourage persons, understand your duty of care and continue to expand it as we all give better service to each other. We'll all be better for it.
I think I would like to share that it can be quite daunting when when you sit down and think about it. Oh my God, I have all these things to do, and how do I do it, and who do I get to help me, and um, do I hire a professional? Do I do it myself? As a professional, I would encourage anyone not just to engage a professional, but to engage the right professional. There are various persons that offer services, and I can tell you that just a simple function of get registering your business, there are many people who do that because it can be a form filling exercise, and there are persons who do that, who offer that service without having a thorough enough understanding of the Companies Act and the implications for you when you, if it is, and the difference between a sole trader, a limited liability company. If you go the way of a limited liability company, what does it mean that you're a director? What does it mean that you're a secretary? What does it mean that you're an incorporator? So finding the right person is important to help you, and doing a little bit of homework yourself so that you're forewarned is forearmed, so to speak. But don't be overwhelmed. It is the process of starting a business, I find, generally is organic, and many of the success stories start up in chaos. And so don't be afraid of the chaos, don't run from it, but just be open-minded to the fact that there must be, at some point in time, there must be something growing and developing out of the chaos that would be more orderly. So that should be your long-term goal. And so there is this small picture, and there is what's in front of you. But one of our contributors talked about starting with the end in mind, and knowing that you have to grow into something. So how do you identify the steps and the pebbles that will build the bridge to take you from concept to success story?
I just love Nalini's statement about starting chaos, because it is chaotic. Even when we think about us as a human being, two cells multiplying to four, multiply, 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 and then systems form and things become functional. But I thought about some of the things when, after we've gotten the chaos and it gets a little bit of a lub and a little bit of a rhythm, you want to make sure to register to protect not just your own intellectual property and your equity and your sweat equity and investment. You want to register to protect what you have as a business. You want to learn, continually learn to succeed. You want to build a team of experts that can work with you, and you want to build for tomorrow and not just today. It is critical important that we understand that we aren't going to be here all the time. And if you don't put systems in place for legacy, you won't have one.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a sobering conversation, an informative conversation, an interesting conversation. And I don't have to wonder. I know that those who are looking at it are going to be encouraged, motivated, inspired, challenged, and everything else in between. That I see the entrepreneur, I see the corporate professional, the entrepreneur who is the owner of the medium to large enterprise, and I see the CEO, all of them looking at this and being able to draw from it. So I appreciate you sharing your heart, sharing your experience, sharing your personal stories and the stories of others. For our book club viewers, thank you for viewing, thank you for sharing, liking, subscribing, and supporting the channel. Certainly, we are going to continue to bring great content in business education and professional development to you. And until next week, when we meet again for the next edition of Book Club Conversation, allow me to make a plug. Look out, plug it in, do a search, Caribbean Business Podcast. You may be thinking what that is. Just search it up. You're going to find it. It's coming. It's being launched. It's going to be amazing. Look it up. It is coming. Caribbean Business Podcast this coming Saturday. Saturday Showcase. What is it? Go to LinkedIn. Look it up. Just type in Saturday Showcase Morning Show. This week, we're going to be chatting with owner of a store that supports local authors, and we're going to be talking about opportunities for local authors, and there's so much more coming. So guys, thank you all my panelists, Kathryn, Rawle, Nalini, and Candace, who had to step up early. Thank you for being here. Book clubbers, thank you for joining in, and everyone, until the next time, stay safe and take care. Have a good night, everyone.